Boys Over Flowers. The story begins with a poor girl named Jandi, who unexpectedly finds herself in the midst of the most elite and prestigious school in the country, Shinhwa High School. This school only accepts children from the wealthiest and most influential families. Jandi is an ordinary girl who grew up in a family running a small laundromat, and her life takes a drastic turn when she saves one of the students from a dangerous incident. This event draws the attention of the students and the school administration. Jandi had never imagined that a simple act of bravery would thrust her into the world of the elite. When she was offered a scholarship to Shinhwa High, she was shocked. She had no place in a world where luxury and power reigned, but the opportunity was too great to refuse. Arriving at the school, she immediately senses the stark contrast between her humble background and the extravagant lives of the students around her. Yet, it's not the wealth that stands out, it's the infamous group known as the F4. The F4, a group of 4 young men, are the dominant force at Shinhwa High. They are handsome, rich, and each of them has their own unique charm. But above all, they are feared. The leader, Gu Junpyo, is the most notorious and feared figure in the school. His wealth and arrogance make him nearly untouchable, and he rules the school with a domineering presence. He's cold, unapproachable, and yet, beneath that tough exterior, there's a vulnerability that few can see. Jandi, however, is different. She doesn't care about his money or status. She sees him for who he truly is, something that intrigues and frustrates him in equal measure. Despite her initial resistance, Jandi finds herself being pulled into the whirlwind of F4's power. Her humble attitude and courage catch the attention of the members of the group, especially Gu Junpyo, who is both repelled and attracted by her presence. She refuses to conform to the rigid social structure at the school and continuously stands up to the bullies and pressures that come with being an outsider. As Jandi tries to navigate her new life at Shinhwa, she quickly realizes that the F4 aren't just a group of boys who live in their own little world of privilege. They each have their own struggles and burdens, hidden behind their flawless facades. Jandi's interactions with them, especially with Gu Junpyo, reveal a complex web of emotions and relationships, as she starts to see past the wealth and power and into their true selves. Her journey is far from easy, but as she faces the many challenges that come with being surrounded by the rich and powerful, Jandi begins to learn more about herself. She becomes more confident, her voice growing stronger, and with every step, she challenges the notion that wealth and status define a person's worth. This transformation doesn't go unnoticed, and it sets the stage for her complex and evolving relationship with the members of F4. But even as she grows closer to them, Jandi's life becomes increasingly complicated. Gu Junpyo's feelings for her grow stronger, but he is torn between his love for her and his family's expectations. Jandi, meanwhile, struggles with her own feelings, trying to keep her heart in check while balancing the pressures of school and the social battles she faces as an outsider in a world built on wealth and privilege. As tensions rise and relationships are tested, Jandi's resilience is put to the ultimate test. She must learn to navigate the murky waters of love, friendship, and power while staying true to her principles. But with every challenge she faces, she becomes more certain that her place in the world doesn't have to be defined by her background. Her strength lies in her ability to stay true to herself, no matter the cost. As Jandi's presence in the world of the F4 continues to disrupt the status quo, her life at Shinhwa becomes a balancing act between the intense pressure from the elite students and her growing connections with the boys. Each day brings new challenges. While she initially resisted their influence, she now finds herself entangled in a web of friendship, rivalry, and even unspoken affection. Gu Junpyo, the leader of the F4, remains an enigma. His rough exterior hides layers of complexity that Jandi begins to uncover, piece by piece. He's used to getting what he wants, and his reputation as the dominant figure in the school is unchallenged. But with Jandi, things aren't so straightforward. She refuses to be intimidated, something Junpyo has never encountered before. Her defiance initially frustrates him, but slowly, he starts to admire her resilience. However, his feelings for her are clouded by his ego and his overwhelming sense of pride. He struggles with the idea of someone who doesn't care about his wealth or status, and this makes him uneasy, as he's always been defined by these things. The more time they spend together, the more Jandi begins to see the vulnerabilities that lie beneath Junpyo's bravado. His arrogance, often mistaken for strength, is really a defense mechanism to protect his fragile sense of self. Behind the wealth and power, he is just a young man seeking approval, struggling to meet the expectations placed on him by his family. But despite his flaws, he finds himself drawn to Jandi in ways he can't explain. Her simple, honest nature calls out to him, and slowly, he begins to let his guard down. Jandi, on the other hand, is far from immune to his charms. Despite the trouble he often causes, she cannot deny the moments of kindness he shows her. His angry outbursts are tempered with gestures that hint at a deeper side of him. She starts to realize that he's not just the bully he seems to be at first glance. His troubled past and complicated family dynamic add layers to his character that she hadn't anticipated. Still, she's cautious. She's learned the hard way that love and trust aren't so easily given, especially when the stakes are so high. In the meantime, the other members of the F4 begin to play their parts in Jandi's life. Iyung, the charming and playful member of the group, starts to see Jandi as more than just the girl who doesn't fall for his flirtations. He begins to value her independence and the strength she shows in standing up to Junpyo's temper. Woo Bin, the quiet and enigmatic one, also takes notice of her. His calm demeanor hides a deep understanding of the pressure she faces, and while he doesn't speak much, his actions convey a silent support that doesn't go unnoticed. And then there's the soft-spoken but kind-hearted Kim Bum, whose gentle nature stands in stark contrast to the intensity of the others. He shows Jandi a kindness she's never known, and this makes her wonder if there's more to these boys than meets the eye. But while Jandi's bonds with the F4 grow stronger, the tension between her and the rest of the students at Shinhwa intensifies. The students view her as a threat, someone who doesn't belong in their perfect world of wealth and privilege. Their cruel tricks and constant mockery put her in increasingly difficult positions. Some try to undermine her by spreading rumors or sabotaging her. But Jandi refuses to back down. Her spirit, though bruised, remains unbroken. Yet, as her connections with the F4 deepen, Jandi finds herself in a precarious position. She starts to question whether she can continue living in a world so foreign to her, where reputation and social status seem to matter more than anything else. The pressure builds, and Jandi begins to feel the weight of it all. But even as she faces one obstacle after another, she begins to see a way forward. Her life, though complicated, has opened up new possibilities she never imagined. The F4 have become more than just a group of rich, untouchable boys. They've become her friends, in their own strange and difficult way. She begins to understand the inner struggles they face, their own doubts and fears, and it makes her realize that they are, in fact, more like her than she initially thought. But no relationship is without its complications. As Jandi grows closer to the boys, she begins to feel conflicted about her feelings for Junpyo. The emotions between them have become increasingly complicated. There are moments of tenderness, moments where it seems like he genuinely cares for her, but there are also moments of tension, when his pride and arrogance come to the forefront. She's caught in the middle of her growing affection for him and her fear of being hurt. Junpyo, for his part, seems to struggle with his feelings as well. He's used to being in control of everything, but with Jandi he feels uncertain. His feelings for her are raw and unfiltered, and they challenge everything he's ever known about love and power. As the story unfolds, Jandi's journey becomes one of self-discovery. She learns to navigate the complexities of love, friendship, and social status while maintaining her sense of self. Her resilience and determination continue to shine through, and despite the challenges she faces, she refuses to let them define her. She is more than just a poor girl who happened to stumble into a world of wealth. She is a force to be reckoned with, and the F4 are beginning to realize that. As the days pass, Jandi finds herself increasingly caught between her growing feelings for Gu Junpyo and the tumultuous dynamics of the F4. The more she interacts with them, the more she begins to understand the emotional complexities that lie beneath the surface of their confident, seemingly untouchable personas. Yet despite this understanding, she remains hesitant, unsure of how to navigate the deepening tension between her desires and the harsh realities of their world. Gu Junpyo's feelings for Jandi are undeniable, but his struggle with his own pride and insecurity continues to cloud his judgment. He's used to being the one in control, the one who dictates how things unfold. But Jandi, with her simplicity and unwavering resolve, challenges him in ways he never anticipated. He finds himself torn between the urge to protect her and the fear that his emotions will make him vulnerable, a vulnerability he has spent years building walls to avoid. In moments of quiet reflection, Junpyo begins to recognize the depth of his feelings for Jandi. But it's not just romantic affection that pulls him toward her. It's her unwavering strength, her ability to stay true to herself in the face of overwhelming pressure. Jandi, in his eyes, represents everything he has been searching for, a source of genuine love and support, something that transcends the wealth and status that have dominated his life. But even as their bond deepens, the forces around them conspire to tear them apart. The other members of F4, particularly the more protective Iyoung, begin to see the growing tension between Junpyo and Jandi. While Iyoung appreciates Jandi's strength, he is concerned about the potential heartbreak that could arise from her involvement with someone as complicated as Junpyo. He sees the darkness that lies within Junpyo's character and fears that Jandi will ultimately be hurt. Meanwhile, the school's social atmosphere grows more hostile. The elite students view Jandi as a threat to their carefully constructed world, and their efforts to isolate her grow bolder. Rumors swirl about her relationship with Junpyo, and she finds herself the target of even more cruelty and bullying. But with every challenge, Jandi only grows stronger. She refuses to let their hatred define her, choosing instead to stand her ground and stay true to the values that have guided her throughout her life. The strain on her relationship with the F4 begins to show. While Junpyo is more focused on his complicated feelings for Jandi, Iyoung, Woobin, and Kim Bum each begin to deal with their own personal struggles. Iyoung, once known for his charming smile and carefree attitude, reveals a darker side. His past relationship has left him emotionally scarred, and he begins to question whether love is worth the pain it brings. Woobin, the stoic member of F4, is haunted by his own demons, including a family secret that has shaped his view of the world. And Kim Bum, the gentle soul of the group, grapples with his own unspoken feelings for Jandi, unsure of where he fits into this complicated web of emotions. Despite their personal struggles, the F4 begins to slowly rally around Jandi, albeit in their own way. They start to recognize the strength and determination that she embodies, strength that is not rooted in wealth or power, but in her ability to overcome the obstacles that life throws her way. Slowly, they begin to shed their layers of arrogance and pride, realizing that Jandi has not only become a force to be reckoned with, but also a source of inspiration for them. Her unwavering spirit is contagious, and it begins to affect their behavior, subtly but undeniably. They start to stand by her, offering their support, albeit in the most unconventional of ways. As Jandi's relationship with Junpyo intensifies, so does the pressure from her own conscience. She is torn between her growing feelings for him and the realization that he may never be able to fully open up to her. She wonders if she's simply a part of his elaborate game of power, something he can claim as his own just as easily as he can discard. Yet despite her doubts, she can't help but be drawn to him. There are moments, rare, fleeting moments, when he allows himself to be vulnerable, and in those moments she sees the person he could be, the person he's hiding from the world. But will that person ever be enough for her? And will he ever truly be able to love her, despite the complexities of their lives? Meanwhile, Gu Junpyo is forced to confront the fact that his feelings for Jandi are not just a fleeting attraction. They are something deeper, something that shakes him to his core. The world he has spent so long constructing, one built on status, power, and control, is at odds with the love he feels for Jandi, a love that is based on nothing but raw, unfiltered emotion. This realization terrifies him. He's used to controlling his life, to dictating how things unfold. But with Jandi, nothing is certain, and this uncertainty unsettles him. His growing affection for her makes him vulnerable, and he fears that in being vulnerable, he will lose everything he's ever known. As the emotional tension mounts, Jandi finds herself at a crossroads. She realizes that she can no longer ignore the feelings that have been building between her and Junpyo, but she also knows that the road ahead will be filled with obstacles. The world they live in, one of wealth, privilege, and social status, will not easily allow them to be together. The forces that have tried to tear her down are still at work, and they won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to keep her in her place. In the end, Jandi must make a choice, whether to stay true to herself and risk everything for love, or to walk away from the complicated emotions that have come to define her relationship with Junpyo. She knows that whatever path she chooses, her life will never be the same again. As Jandi stands at the precipice of a life-changing decision, the weight of her emotions becomes more pressing with each passing day. Her feelings for Gu Junpyo have deepened beyond what she ever anticipated, but the complexities of their relationship remain tangled in confusion, fear, and pride. She knows that the connection between them has become undeniable, yet the world they inhabit, where power and social standing are everything, continues to pose insurmountable obstacles. The battle within her heart grows stronger as she realizes that love in this world may come at a far higher cost than she's willing to pay. Despite her growing affection for Junpyo, Jandi remains wary. She knows he is not the same as the others. He isn't just a charming boy surrounded by wealth and privilege, and his feelings for her have evolved in ways he can't quite understand. But the challenge of their relationship isn't just the friction between their worlds. It's the inherent emotional turbulence that comes with loving someone who has spent his life surrounded by expectations and insecurities. Junpyo wants to protect her, but his actions often come from a place of control, as if keeping her close will shield her from the cruelty of the world. He struggles with the idea that Jandi doesn't need his protection, that she can stand on her own, and it's a conflict that continually pushes them apart even as they grow closer. The increasing pressure of their relationship doesn't only affect Jandi and Junpyo. The other members of F4 begin to experience their own transformations, spurred on by Jandi's presence in their lives. Eyoung, whose flirtations and charm have always been his armor, begins to show signs of emotional vulnerability. His past, one filled with pain from a failed relationship, has kept him from opening his heart, but Jandi's example of courage and resilience causes him to reconsider what it means to truly love and be loved. Though he struggles with the weight of his past, Eyoung starts to see that love is not just about avoiding pain, but about opening oneself to the possibility of healing. Woo Bin, the quiet and seemingly emotionless member of F4, is another whose life has been shaped by secrets and burdens. His family is entangled in issues that have led him to become emotionally distant from others. But seeing Jandi stand firm against the injustices around her begins to shift his perspective. His stoic demeanor slowly cracks as he realizes that the people who matter most in his life are those who can understand the complexity of his feelings. Woo Bin begins to confront his own fears and vulnerabilities, learning from Jandi that there is strength in embracing one's true self. Then there's Kim Bum, the gentle and compassionate soul of the group. He has always been the one to offer kindness and support to others, but his feelings for Jandi have begun to cloud his judgment. Though he is quietly enamored with her, he knows that the complexities of their lives will make it difficult for anything to come of it. Still, his loyalty to her doesn't waver. He becomes her pillar of support, offering her a sense of calm amid the chaos of her world. His tenderness serves as a reminder to Jandi that, despite the tension and conflict surrounding her, there are still moments of peace to be found. Yet, no matter how much the F4 changes as a result of Jandi's influence, the external forces working against them remain relentless. The students at Shinhwa continue to view Jandi as an outsider, and their cruelty becomes more pronounced. It's not just about status anymore, it's about power. To the elite students, Jandi represents a threat to their carefully constructed social order. And the more she refuses to bow to their expectations, the more they turn on her, pushing her to the brink. As the pressure mounts, Jandi finds herself questioning whether she can continue to fight against such overwhelming odds. But in the midst of all this, something unexpected happens. Despite the relentless antagonism from her peers, and despite the complications in her relationship with Junpyo, Jandi begins to realize that her strength is not defined by the opinions of others. The love she has for Junpyo, though complicated and fraught with difficulties, is real, and it has pushed her to grow in ways she never expected. She learns that love is not about perfection. It's about understanding and accepting each other's flaws and growing together. The realization that love can be messy, painful, and even uncertain, but still worth fighting for, dawns on her. But the greatest test for Jandi, and for her relationship with Junpyo, comes when a deep betrayal threatens to undo everything they've built. A dark secret about Junpyo's family is revealed, one that shakes Jandi's trust in him to its core. The discovery sends shockwaves through their relationship, forcing them both to confront the harsh realities of their lives and the weight of their emotions. The world they have fought so hard to carve out together feels like it's crumbling around them, and Jandi must decide if she can continue to love him, knowing the truth of his past. Junpyo, feeling the full weight of his actions and the consequences they have on those around him, is forced to reckon with the fact that his relationship with Jandi may not survive this. His pride and his fear of being vulnerable have kept him from truly opening up to her. And now, as their bond faces the ultimate test, he must come to terms with the fact that love, in all its forms, requires sacrifice. The journey ahead will not be easy, and there will be moments when it seems as if everything is lost. But one thing remains certain. Neither Jandi nor Junpyo are willing to give up without a fight. In the end, Jandi realizes that her love for Junpyo is not about fixing him or saving him from the world. It's about accepting him for who he is, with all his imperfections and struggles. And in accepting him, she finds her own strength. Their relationship, though fragile, becomes a symbol of resilience, showing them both that even in the darkest of times, love can be a source of light. The final test of their bond comes when Jandi and Junpyo must face the reality of their differences head-on. Their worlds may never fully align, but the love they share has the power to bridge those gaps. It is not the world they inhabit that defines them, but the choices they make and the strength they find within each other. As the story draws to a close, Jandi has transformed. No longer the naive girl who stumbled into the world of the F4, she has become a force in her own right, someone who has learned the true meaning of love, friendship, and sacrifice. And while the road ahead may be uncertain, she knows one thing for sure. She will face it with the courage and determination that have carried her this far. Kano. At first glance, they seemed like complete opposites, like two poles pulling in different directions. The girl striving for perfection and the boy hiding an entire world of emotions beneath his calm exterior. Their meeting wasn't by chance. Each of them carried their own secret, their own struggles and pain, concealing it behind masks. She, Shizuka Miyamoto, was the epitome of the ideal, always the top student, always smiling, always composed. He, Yukino Aramura, appeared just as perfect on the outside, but his calmness was merely a facade to hide the storm raging inside. For Shizuka, maintaining her image as the perfect student was more than just a role. It was an armor. Behind that flawless exterior, however, was a person trapped in a relentless need to prove herself, to her family, to her peers, and, perhaps most of all, to herself. She couldn't let anyone see the cracks beneath her well-crafted image, especially not in the highly competitive world of high school, where every slight misstep could mean the difference between being admired or being forgotten. Yukino, on the other hand, had long since learned the art of hiding his true self. His stoic demeanor and outwardly indifferent attitude were well practiced, the result of years spent constructing a version of himself that would be acceptable to the world. He was the model student, too, the one others admired from afar. Yet, behind his cool and seemingly perfect exterior, he battled his own demons. The pressure to maintain the image of the perfect student was suffocating, but what he feared most was that others might see through his mask and reveal the vulnerabilities he desperately kept hidden. They weren't supposed to connect, not in a world that valued appearance over reality. But sometimes, fate has a way of throwing people together when they least expect it. One seemingly trivial encounter, an unexpected moment of vulnerability from Shizuka, led to the unraveling of the barriers they had both so carefully constructed. For the first time, Shizuka found herself looking into the eyes of someone who understood the weight of her own struggles, someone who didn't demand her to be perfect. It started with a single conversation, a brief exchange that neither of them expected to change anything. But from that moment on, something shifted. They became something more than just classmates. They became witnesses to each other's true selves, a silent understanding growing between them. They saw past the masks, the expectations, and for the first time they could just be themselves. As the days passed, the connection between Shizuka and Yukino deepened. Neither of them had ever allowed anyone to get so close before, and yet, there was something undeniably comforting about their shared vulnerability. They found solace in the silence between them, as if their mere presence was enough to say everything that words could not. Shizuka began to notice small things about Yukino that she hadn't before, the way his eyes would occasionally flicker with unspoken thoughts, the slight tension in his shoulders when he thought no one was watching, the way he would flinch ever so slightly when someone praised his achievements. It was in these moments that she realized the truth. Behind his cool, composed front was a person who, like her, was exhausted by the expectations placed upon him. He wasn't as perfect as everyone believed, and neither was she. For Yukino, Shizuka's presence was a breath of fresh air. She didn't demand anything from him, no admiration, no praise, no approval. In a world where everyone saw him as the perfect student, the one who never faltered, never made mistakes, her acceptance of him felt like a sanctuary. She didn't see him as a model of perfection, but as a person with flaws, struggles, and a hidden side he longed to reveal. But even as they grew closer, they were still wary. Their masks were still firmly in place, carefully constructed walls that neither was willing to completely tear down. It wasn't that they didn't trust each other. It was more that they feared the repercussions of letting their guard down completely. To show weakness, to admit vulnerability, that was something neither had ever dared to do before. Despite the growing bond, the pressures of school life continued to haunt them. Shizuka's relentless drive to maintain her image, her need to always be perfect, pushed her to the brink. The expectations of her parents, her teachers, and even her friends weighed heavily on her. She found herself caught in a never-ending cycle of striving for excellence, even though it left her feeling hollow inside. Yukino, too, felt the weight of his own struggles. He was expected to excel in everything, to always be the model student, the perfect son, the perfect friend. But inside, he longed for something more, something real, something honest. He couldn't keep up the facade forever, but the fear of what would happen if he let it slip was paralyzing. What would happen if everyone saw the cracks beneath the surface? What would happen if they found out who he truly was? One afternoon, in the quiet of the school courtyard, Shizuka and Yukino found themselves alone, sitting side by side on the bench. Neither of them spoke, but the weight of their unspoken words hung heavily in the air. It was in this moment, in the stillness, that they both realized something they had been avoiding. They didn't need to be perfect anymore. They didn't need to hide behind their masks. For the first time, they could just be themselves, flawed, imperfect, but real. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. For Shizuka, it meant facing the truth about her own limitations, about her fears of failure and rejection. For Yukino, it meant confronting the fear that he was never truly enough, that the image he had worked so hard to build was just that, an image, a lie. But in that moment, they both knew they weren't alone. They had each other, and that, for the first time, felt like enough. As the weeks passed, the bond between Shizuka and Yukino deepened in ways neither had anticipated. They began to trust each other in ways that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Slowly, the walls they had so carefully built began to crumble, piece by piece, as they each allowed the other to see their true selves. The masks they had worn for so long began to slip away, revealing the raw, unpolished truths beneath. For Shizuka, it was a revelation. She had spent her entire life trying to be perfect, trying to meet the expectations of everyone around her. Her parents, her friends, her teachers. She had always been the model student, the one who never made mistakes, who never let anyone see her weaknesses. But with Yukino, for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to live up to any image. She could be messy, imperfect, and vulnerable, and he didn't judge her for it. Yukino, too, found himself opening up in ways he had never imagined. For so long, He had been the quiet, distant figure, the one who kept everyone at arm's length. He had kept his emotions locked away, afraid of what would happen if anyone saw the person he really was. But with Shizuka, he felt something different. She didn't need him to be perfect. She didn't want him to be flawless. She simply wanted him to be himself. It was in these moments, in the quiet conversations between them, that they began to truly understand each other. They both carried the weight of expectations, the pressure to succeed, the fear of failing. But they also understood that they didn't have to do it alone. They could share their burdens, their doubts, their fears, and find solace in each other's presence. Still, as much as they had grown closer, there were moments of hesitation. Old habits were hard to break, and the fear of vulnerability still lingered. Shizuka found herself pulling back at times, afraid of what it would mean to fully let go of her carefully crafted image. Yukino, too, struggled with the idea of fully opening up. He had built his life around the idea of being perfect, of never showing weakness. Letting that go, even for Shizuka, felt like an enormous leap. But the more time they spent together, the more they realized that the only way forward was to continue to be honest with each other, to continue to reveal the parts of themselves they had hidden for so long. The more they shared, the more they understood that perfection was an illusion, a false standard that no one could ever live up to. They didn't need to be perfect, they just needed to be real. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet park, Shizuka turned to Yukino, her eyes searching his face. "Do you ever wish you could just stop? Stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to meet everyone's expectations." Yukino looked at her, his expression softening. "Every day, but it's hard. It's like there's this pressure to always be the best, to never show weakness. If I let that go, I don't know who I'd be." Shizuka nodded, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her sleeve. "I feel the same way, but I don't think we need to be perfect. Not for anyone else." Yukino turned to her, a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. "Then, what do we need to be?" Shizuka smiled gently, the corners of her lips curving with a warmth that reached her eyes. "We just need to be ourselves. Messy, imperfect, and real." In that moment, something shifted between them. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic gesture. But in that simple exchange, they both knew that they had found something precious. A connection built not on ideals or expectations, but on mutual understanding and acceptance. They didn't need to be perfect, and neither did anyone else. They just needed to be there for each other as they were. As the seasons shifted and time passed, the relationship between Shizuka and Yukino evolved. No longer were they two distant figures, trapped in their individual struggles for perfection. They had become something else, something more. They were no longer just classmates, no longer just people carrying the weight of their own burdens. They had become each other's refuge, a place where they could let go of the masks they had worn for so long. But even as they grew closer, the outside world never stopped pressing in on them. Shizuka's parents still expected excellence, still demanded that she maintain her image of perfection. Yukino's teachers continued to praise him for his achievements, but they never saw the stress that lay beneath the surface. And while they had both found a safe haven in each other, there were still moments when the pressure of the world outside seemed unbearable. It wasn't easy, not by any means. The journey of self-acceptance was fraught with doubt and insecurity. Shizuka still had moments when she felt the weight of the expectations on her shoulders, when she wondered if she was truly enough just as she was. Yukino, too, wrestled with the fear of being exposed, of showing too much of himself and finding that it wasn't enough. But every time those doubts crept in, they found solace in each other. They learned to lean on each other, to remind each other that they didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to meet anyone's expectations but their own. The most important thing was that they were there for each other, through the quiet moments of vulnerability and the noisy demands of the outside world. One afternoon, as they sat in the school courtyard, the sun casting long shadows over the grass, Shizuka turned to Yukino, her gaze soft. "You know," she said quietly, "sometimes I still feel like I'm not enough, like I'll never be good enough." Yukino looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. You don't have to be good enough for anyone but yourself, Shizuka. We're always enough as we are. Imperfect, flawed, and real. Shizuka smiled at him, the weight in her chest lifting just a little. For the first time, she felt like she was truly starting to understand that. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to be what others wanted her to be. She just needed to be herself. And for Yukino, that same realization was beginning to take root. He had spent so long trying to meet the expectations of others, trying to live up to an image of perfection that wasn't real. But in Shizuka's presence, he could finally see that he didn't have to carry that burden alone. He didn't have to be flawless. He just had to be himself. The bond they shared grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't always easy, and they still faced the challenges of their own insecurities, but they knew now that they didn't have to face those challenges alone. They had each other, and that made all the difference. As they walked home together that evening, side by side, the world around them felt a little quieter. The pressures of school, the expectations from others, the weight of their own fears. All of it seemed a little less daunting when they were together. They had found something rare, something precious. A connection that transcended perfection, that was built on mutual understanding and acceptance. They weren't perfect. They weren't flawless, but they were real, and that, in the end, was enough.